Picture this. It's night, 70,000 years ago. You and your little band of hunter-gatherers are huddled around a fire. The air smells like smoke, roasted roots, and, oh, what's that? A steaming brew of something suspiciously bitter. The shaman says, "It'll help you talk to the ancestors," but you're pretty sure it's just going to make you see purple mammoths tap dancing in the dark. Yes, our ancestors were the original psychonauts. Long before Netflix, long before herbal tea TikToks, humans were already experimenting with plants that were more oops than They chewed poisonous bark, brewed funky leaves, smoked mystery roots, not because it tasted good, but because it cracked open reality like a prehistoric disco ball. And here's the wild part. Many of them believed these altered states weren't just trips. They were journeys into the spirit world, conversations with the dead, bargaining sessions with invisible beings who controlled the hunt, the rain, and whether your in-laws got eaten by a saber-toothed tiger this week. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, we're diving into the strange, shadowy, and occasionally hilarious world of prehistoric psychedelics. This is a story about survival, about belief, about the moment humans discovered that nature wasn't just food and firewood, it was also a ticket to the cosmic funhouse. So fluff your pillow, close your eyes, and let's wander back into the Stone Age, where talking to spirits required nothing more than courage, curiosity, and a stomach strong enough to handle poisonous plants. Close your eyes. Imagine the world not as it is today with glowing screens and late-night pizza deliveries, but as it was 70,000 years ago. There are no buzzing phones, no neon lights, not even the gentle hum of your refrigerator, keeping leftovers cold. Instead, the soundtrack of life is wind pushing through tall grasses, the crackle of fire, and maybe, if you're unlucky, the distant roar of something with far too many teeth. Your tribe is small, no more than a couple dozen people, and everyone knows everyone else, whether they like it or not. You can't just move to another city. If your neighbor sings too loudly, your whole world is right here, clustered around this fire, sharing warmth, food, and the occasional awkward silence when someone burns the roots again. The land around you is unpredictable. Sometimes it offers bounty clusters of berries, rivers full of fish, herds of animals lumbering past. Other times, it is unforgiving, leaving you clutching your stomach, wondering if maybe chewing on bark is worth a try. Survival is a full-time job, and vacation days do not exist. Every morning you wake up in a bed of furs or leaves, your hair full of twigs, and your main goal is the same as yesterday. Don't die. Simple, really. But humans are not creatures satisfied with just surviving. Even when every calorie matters, when winter can kill and predators stalk the night, there's this itch, a need to wonder why things happen, to ask questions bigger than hunger. Why did the storm strike? Why did the mammoths wander away? What happens when the fire inside a person, the one you see in their eyes, goes out forever? These are not questions that help you spear a deer, but they cling to your thoughts like burrs on a wool blanket. And in this age, when knowledge is scarce and mysteries are everywhere, you can't just Google the answer. Instead, you turn to the most reliable authority you know, the old one, sitting by the fire with painted skin, feathers in their hair, and a look in their eyes that suggests they've seen things you couldn't even dream of. This is the shaman, the guide, the bridge between your tiny tribe and the vast, incomprehensible universe. They claim to know the secrets, to have spoken with ancestors, to have glimpsed the forces behind storms and sickness. How? Not through PowerPoint slides, not through textbooks, through plants, through smoke, through substances that turn the ordinary world into a kaleidoscope of visions and whispers. But let's not rush there just yet. First, consider the reality of life 70 millennia ago. Picture a cold night, when stars blaze so brightly, you could swear they're watching you. Your tribe has no written words, no concept of time beyond sunrise and sunset, no idea that one day people will fly through the sky on metal birds and argue about pineapple on pizza. All you have are stories, told over and over, to keep memory alive. And these stories are not just entertainment. They are maps of reality. If someone tells you that a certain plant is sacred, that its bitter roots let you hear the ancestors whisper, you don't question it. You don't roll your eyes and say, "Yeah, right, Steve." No, you listen, because stories are the foundation of survival. In these small groups, everything is communal. If someone is sick, the whole tribe feels the weight. If someone finds food, it is shared, because hoarding means anger, and anger means risk. When resources are thin, harmony is not optional. It's survival. And harmony is often reinforced through ritual, through nights when the fire blazes, and everyone sits together while the shaman begins to chant. You've been hunting, gathering, struggling all day, but now comes a different task: listening. Listening to the voice that explains why the world is as it is, and why you must not lose hope. Sometimes those rituals involve substances that bend reality. But even before that discovery, humans were ready for something beyond the physical. They longed for meaning, for connection, for a sense that all their suffering wasn't random. This longing is the soil into which the seeds of spirit journeys and poison brews would soon be planted. Without this hunger for answers, without the curiosity that made our species restless and inventive, maybe no one would have dared to chew that strange-looking leaf in the first place. So here we are, perched at the edge of history, in a time when survival is hard, but curiosity is harder to ignore. The stage is set. The world is vast. The mysteries are endless. And the humans gathered around this fire are about to stumble into a new kind of knowledge. Not the kind you can carve into stone, but the kind that comes when reality itself wobbles, and the veil between life and death seems to shimmer like heat over desert sand. And once that door is opened, it will never fully close again. Now, let us step a little closer to that fire and focus on the figure who sits at its center, the shaman, the healer, the one who always looks like they know something you don't. Every tribe had someone like this, a person who seemed half in this world and half in another. They didn't spend their days chasing deer or digging tubers. No, their job was stranger, heavier, and often scarier, to hold the invisible threads that tied the tribe together with the universe. Think of them as the prehistoric Wi-Fi router. When you wanted connection, whether to your ancestors, to spirits, or to the forces of nature, you went through them. And like modern routers, they were temperamental, occasionally confusing, and sometimes required you to sit very still while chanting nonsense just to get a signal. But their importance cannot be overstated. When illness struck, when a hunt failed, when storms destroyed shelters, it was the shaman who stepped forward with explanations and remedies. Did you catch a sickness from bad water? Well, maybe. But the shaman might say it was because an ancestor was displeased. Did your child recover after the shaman waved smoke over them? Then clearly, the ritual worked. It was a delicate balance of psychology, placebo, and genuine herbal medicine. Because here's the twist. Shamans weren't all smoke and mirrors. They were the first pharmacists. They knew which plants soothed pain, which herbs reduced fever, and which mushrooms made you see glowing hyenas dancing the Macarena. Of course, that knowledge didn't come easy. The only way to learn what plants did was to try them. Trial and error. Emphasis on error. Somewhere in deep time, a brave, or possibly very unlucky human picked up a strange root, chewed it, and promptly discovered whether it was healing or horrifying. The survivors remembered. The shamans remembered best. They built vast oral libraries of plant lore, carrying recipes and warnings in their minds, because writing hadn't yet been invented. Imagine a brain stuffed with the details of dozens of plants, their seasons, their effects, no sticky notes, no Google Docs, just memory. And here's where it gets fascinating. Some of those plants didn't just heal the body, they bent the mind. They created visions, altered time, blurred the boundary between dreaming and waking. For most people, this would be terrifying. But for the shaman, it was proof of their calling. If you could consume poison and come back with stories, if you could wander through a hallucinatory landscape and still find your way home, then you weren't just human, you were chosen. This reputation gave shamans enormous power. Picture it. Your tribe is huddled around the fire, anxious about tomorrow's hunt. The shaman sips a vile-tasting brew. Their eyes glaze over, and suddenly they begin speaking in voices, not their own. They tremble, they laugh, they howl, and then they declare, the ancestors say, the herd will be near the river at dawn. If the hunt succeeds, their authority grows. If it fails, well, maybe you didn't believe hard enough. Either way, the shaman remains the translator of mystery. And make no mistake, this was not play acting. Many believed, with absolute certainty, that they were traveling to another world, crossing into a spirit realm where animals spoke and ancestors offered guidance. For them, hallucination was not delusion, it was revelation. To the tribe, it meant survival. A shaman who could see visions might lead you to food, protect you from illness, or explain why misfortune struck. In a dangerous, unpredictable world, those explanations were priceless. Sometimes, of course, things went wrong. Not every shaman survived their experiments. Some learned the hard way that a particular mushroom didn't open doors to the spirit world, so much as it slammed the door shut permanently. Yet those who survived, who carried strange knowledge back from the edge, became legends. They were living proof that humans could flirt with death, dance with poison, and return bearing wisdom. So, when you picture a shaman, don't just imagine feathers and chants. Imagine someone with the guts to chew on the unknown, to face visions that made reality wobble, and to tell stories that bound the tribe together. They were guides, yes, but also guinea pigs. They were scientists without labs, psychologists without couches, and priests without churches. In their hands, plants became bridges, and poison became prayer. And this is where our story begins to twist. Because once you have someone in the tribe who can talk to spirits, once you believe that plants can open doors between worlds, you've set the stage for one of humanity's strangest and most dangerous traditions. Getting high on poison in the hope of touching the divine. It probably started with hunger. That gnawing ache in the stomach that drives people to chew things they would never otherwise consider food. Picture it. A small band of humans wandering across a dry plain, tired and desperate, their bellies empty after a failed hunt. The ground crunches beneath their bare feet, the air tastes of dust, and the only thing moving on the horizon is a herd of mammoths that are way too far away and way too big to even think about chasing. In moments like this, anything that looks even vaguely edible becomes a candidate. Roots, bark, bugs, leaves, it doesn't matter. Someone has to be the one to try. And if you're the youngest sibling, congratulations. That someone is probably you. So imagine one brave or unlucky soul picking up a plant. Maybe it's bitter, maybe it's sticky, maybe it's clearly suspicious. But when you're starving, suspicion takes a back seat. They chew. The taste is revolting. So sharp and strange, it makes their eyes water. Their companions laugh and jeer, because that's what humans do, even in prehistory. But then something happens. The chewer stares off into the distance. Their jaw slackens, their pupils widen, and then they start giggling. Not just a little laugh, but full-on hysterics, like they just heard the funniest joke in the universe. The tribe is alarmed, or maybe they're impressed. They watch as their companion points at the horizon and starts babbling about how the mammoths are glowing like lanterns, how the stars are singing, how the ground is breathing beneath their feet. Everyone else squints at the horizon. Nope, just mammoths. Regular, grumpy, hairy mammoths. Nothing glowing, nothing singing. But to the poor leaf chewer, reality has shifted, and they are suddenly in a private conversation with the cosmos. This is where the accidental discovery takes hold. Because after the panic wears off, once they realize their friend isn't dying, just laughing and staring at the sky, someone else thinks, maybe I'll try a nibble. And that is the moment the door opens. Because now it's not just one strange person talking about glowing mammoths. It's two people swaying and giggling and claiming to see things no one else can. The rest of the group, skeptical but intrigued, files this experience away under dangerous but interesting. That's how these things begin, not with solemn rituals, but with mistakes, with accidents, with curiosity, and a willingness to chew whatever is at hand. Human history is littered with these discoveries. The first person to eat honey had to risk being stung by angry bees. The first person to drink fermented fruit had to ignore the smell and hope it didn't kill them. And the first person to taste a psychedelic plant had to believe, at least for a moment, that the risk of poison was worth the chance of nourishment. Instead of food, they found visions. It's easy to imagine how quickly these moments turned into myths. When your world is unpredictable and full of danger, when death lurks in the form of predators, storms, and hunger, you pay attention to anything that feels like a message from beyond. So if a plant makes you see glowing mammoths, maybe that's not madness. Maybe it's a sign. Maybe the plant is sacred, a way of touching the unseen, of receiving wisdom from forces greater than yourself. The tribe gathers around the chewer and asks, "What do you see? What are the mammoths telling you?" And just like that, the accidental discovery becomes the seed of ritual. Of course, the comedy is never far away. Not every trip was enlightening. Sometimes, the mammoths weren't glowing, they were charging. Sometimes the spirits spoke, but only to say, "You really shouldn't have eaten that much." Early humans must have learned very quickly that dosage mattered. Too little, and you felt nothing but a bitter mouth. Too much, and you ended up lying in the dirt, convinced your toenails were plotting against you. Yet those mistakes carried knowledge. The tribe learned to listen to the ones who dared, the ones who pushed into the unknown. And from these experiments, patterns emerged. They noticed that chewing one kind of leaf led to visions, while another kind led to stomach cramps and death. They began to separate the edible from the sacred, the food from the forbidden, the poison from the portals. This was the beginning of a relationship with plants that went far beyond hunger. It was the moment humans realized the natural world had layers. Some plants gave you calories, others gave you healing, and a rare few gave you glimpses into the strange, glowing landscape of the mind. And once humans saw that landscape, they could never unsee it. So, the glowing mammoths may have been imaginary, but the impact was real. One leaf, one mistake, one curious bite could change the course of culture. It was the dawn of a new kind of discovery. Not just finding food, but finding meaning. When we think of poison today, we picture skull and crossbones labels, locked cabinets, and ominous warnings, something to be avoided at all costs. But in the ancient world, poison wasn't a neat category. It was part of the great grey area of survival. The same plant that could kill you if eaten raw might heal you if boiled just right. The same mushroom that made one person sick could give another person visions of talking ancestors. The line between deadly and divine was razor thin, and prehistoric humans were constantly walking it. Consider how knowledge spread in those times. There were no textbooks, no doctors, no pharmacy aisles. Everything was learned through experimentation, and the cost of error was often life itself. If one person ate the wrong berry and collapsed, the lesson was remembered for generations. If another person used the same berry in tiny amounts and discovered it numbed pain, that knowledge was preserved too. Poison wasn't just danger, it was potential. It was the raw material of medicine, mystery, and myth. For the shaman, poison was a tool, not just for healing, but for reaching beyond the visible world. The plants that twisted perception, that made the ordinary strange, were treated with reverence. They weren't snacks, they weren't meals, they were gateways. To touch them carelessly was to risk death, but to use them carefully was to brush against the spirit world, and that made them sacred. Imagine a ritual night. The fire is high, sparks racing into the dark sky like tiny stars. The tribe gathers, restless and tired from the endless grind of survival. The shaman produces a bundle of leaves, roots, or seeds. Everyone knows these are not food. No one eats them casually. The shaman prepares them with great care, muttering prayers, mixing them with smoke or water. The air fills with a sharp, pungent scent. Then, slowly, deliberately, the shaman consumes the potion. The tribe waits, tense, as time passes. And then the shaman begins to shake, to laugh, to cry. Their voice changes. They describe visions of ancestors, of animals, of spirits, demanding respect. And in that moment, the poison has become more than a plant. It has become a doorway. From the outside, you might call it hallucination. From the inside, it was revelation. When the shaman spoke of a vision, the tribe believed. The poison wasn't killing them, it was carrying them to another place. And because not everyone dared to drink, the ones who did became special, chosen, feared, and respected. The sacredness of poison also came from its unpredictability. Unlike food plants, which could be trusted, poisons demanded humility. You never knew exactly what would happen. Too much, and you might not return. Too little, and nothing happened at all. That unpredictability mirrored life itself, fragile, dangerous, beautiful, fleeting. Poison became a metaphor for existence, and so it became woven into rituals that explained life and death. Over time, tribes developed methods to control these forces. They learned how to prepare poisons to strip away their deadliest effects while preserving their power. boiling, drying, smoking, mixing with other herbs. All of these were ways to tame the wildness of the plant. And through this taming, poison became medicine. The same leaf that once made someone vomit could now, carefully processed, ease pain. The same seed that once brought terrifying visions could now, in a smaller dose, bring clarity and courage. This blurred line between medicine and poison shaped how humans saw the world. Nothing was purely good or bad. Everything had potential, if only you knew how to use it. That worldview lingers even today. The strongest medicines in modern hospitals are often derived from substances that would kill if taken wrong. The ancients didn't have chemical formulas, but they had wisdom, born from trial, error, and respect for the mysterious power of plants. So when we say some deadly plants were sacred, it wasn't because prehistoric people were reckless or foolish. It was because they recognized that in danger, there was also possibility. They saw that the line between life and death could be walked, if only with care and ritual. And in walking that line, they found not just survival, but meaning. The plants that killed also healed. The poisons that twisted perception also opened doors. And for those who dared to risk it, the world was no longer just earth and sky. It was a layered, mysterious place, filled with spirits, ancestors, and glowing mammoths, waiting to speak. When you close your eyes at night and drift into dreams, strange images flicker across the screen of your mind. Maybe you're flying over rooftops. Maybe you're trying to run, but your legs move as if they're glued in syrup. Or maybe you're late for an exam you didn't study for, and also happen to be naked. Now imagine that instead of those dreamlike oddities, you are wide awake, sitting around a fire, and the images are not just personal nonsense, but profound visions that feel as real as the ground beneath your feet. That was the experience of early humans when they dared to chew, drink, or smoke the plants that twisted reality. So, what did they actually see? The answer depends on the person, the plant, and the place. But certain patterns kept appearing across cultures, across continents, and across centuries. And the first of these was the vision of ancestors. Picture sitting in the dark, your stomach full of bitter root, your head heavy and light at the same time. And then, suddenly, there's your grandmother. Not as a memory, not as a fuzzy dream, but right there before you, her face glowing in the firelight, though she died years ago. She speaks, and her voice is clear, comforting, and terrifying all at once. She tells you the tribe must move to the river tomorrow, or that you need to mend the quarrel with your brother, or simply that she's proud of you. These ancestor visions gave early humans a way to keep the dead alive, to continue conversations that otherwise would have ended forever. Animals also appeared in these visions, but not as ordinary beasts. The mammoth wasn't just a mammoth. It was luminous, massive, and speaking in riddles. The lion wasn't just a predator. It was a messenger with golden eyes that looked straight into your soul. Snakes slithered through vision quests, sometimes as symbols of danger, sometimes as teachers, sometimes as both. Birds, especially, became common messengers in the dreamlike hallucinations. Flying creatures seemed to embody the idea of crossing between worlds, gliding effortlessly from earth to sky, and so they became associated with the soul itself. And then there were the patterns. If you've ever rubbed your eyes too hard and seen bursts of light or shifting shapes, you've brushed against the edges of what many early humans experienced during altered states. Spirals, zigzags, latticework, pulsating dots that turned into rivers of color, these were universal. Whether in Africa, Europe, Asia, or the Americas, people described the same shapes, the same cosmic geometries. Neuroscientists today would tell you these are entoptic phenomena, patterns generated by the brain itself when its normal rhythms are scrambled. But for ancient humans, these were not brain glitches. They were messages from the universe. They were the designs painted on the walls of creation, proof that reality itself had a hidden blueprint. Some visions combined all these elements. A hunter might see his dead father speaking through the body of a glowing elk, surrounded by spirals of fire in the sky. To him, it was not nonsense. It was truth, a cosmic telegram delivered through the language of images. And when he returned to the tribe, shaky and sweating, his story became more than entertainment. It became guidance. If he said the elk spirit demanded they hunt in a certain valley, the tribe might listen. If he said the ancestors warned of danger, they would prepare. The visions weren't just private hallucinations, they were shared cultural experiences that shaped decisions, rituals, and myths. Humor, of course, sneaks in even here. Imagine being the poor soul who eats the wrong dose and comes back, swearing that the spirits told him the tribe must stop eating berries because the berries are secretly laughing at them. Or the one who insists he saw a squirrel the size of a mountain teaching him how to juggle. Not every vision was useful, but even the absurd ones left an impact. Sometimes they were dismissed, sometimes woven into stories, and sometimes even adopted as new taboos. After all, in a world without written law, why not let a cosmic squirrel dictate the rules? But behind the jokes, there was always awe. When people saw ancestors, animals, and patterns in these altered states, it changed how they understood existence. Death wasn't the end if you could still speak with your grandmother. Animals weren't just prey or predators. They were fellow beings with voices and wisdom. And the patterns, the endless spirals and lattices hinted that the universe itself was alive, pulsing with order, just beyond human comprehension. To drift into such visions, to see them in the firelight and believe they were real, was to live in a world where the boundary between ordinary and extraordinary had dissolved. And once you've seen a glowing mammoth speak your name, even when you wake up the next morning and your head aches and your mouth tastes of ashes, you cannot go back to believing the world is just trees and rocks and meat. You now believe the world is woven with meaning, and that meaning can be glimpsed through plants, spirits, and visions that turn the night sky into a cosmic stage. For every successful vision, for every inspiring journey to the spirit world, there was a darker side. The line between revelation and disaster was perilously thin. Remember, these weren't pharmaceutical capsules with neat dosage labels. They were wild plants, roots, and mushrooms gathered by hand, each one carrying unpredictable strength. Too much of a certain bark, and instead of chatting with your ancestors, you found yourself gasping for air. Too many seeds, and instead of seeing cosmic spirals, your body convulsed, your heart stopped, and the tribe was left to mourn. In this sense, spiritual travel was like playing with fire. Fire warms, cooks, and protects, but it also burns and destroys. In the same way, poisonous plants carried both promise and peril. The shaman, who often experimented first, bore the greatest risk. Some never returned. Their deaths became part of the law. the brave one who ventured too far into the spirit world and could not find the way back. To the tribe, these weren't just accidents. They were sacrifices, proof that the spirit world demanded a price for its secrets. Imagine the scene. The fire flickers, the tribe gathers, the shaman drinks a bitter brew. Hours pass, their body trembling, their voice rising in chants. At first it seems like every other ritual, but then their face grows pale, their breathing shallow. The chants stop. Panic ripples through the tribe. Someone rushes forward, but what can they do? There are no antidotes, no hospitals, no doctors to call. The shaman collapses, and the only explanation that makes sense is that the spirits took them. Sometimes it wasn't even the shaman. Sometimes a curious youth, tired of waiting for wisdom, chewed the sacred leaves in secret, hoping for visions of glowing animals and ancestors. Instead, their body rejected the poison violently, and they didn't survive the night. The tribe learned another harsh lesson. Some doors should not be opened carelessly. The danger wasn't only death, but madness. Some who returned from spiritual travel were never the same. They came back shaking, muttering, staring into the distance, with eyes that no longer recognized the world. Today, we'd call it psychological trauma. Back then, it was possession, or punishment, or proof that the person had been marked permanently by the other world. Sometimes they were revered, sometimes shunned, but always changed. And yet, despite the risks, humans kept doing it. Why? Because the rewards felt greater than the dangers. A successful vision could guide the tribe, heal the sick, or ease the grief of losing loved ones. But the price of failure was steep, and the graves of those who tried and died were silent reminders of the razor's edge. There is even a grim humor to it. Imagine telling your children, "Don't eat those mushrooms." Your uncle did, and he thought he was a bird until he jumped off a rock. Lessons were often carved in tragedy. The world was full of dangerous experiments, and every death carried information for the survivors. They learned to respect the power of plants, to fear them as much as they revered them. These dangerous outcomes gave rise to rituals of caution. The plants were not taken casually. They were surrounded by ceremony, prayers, and taboos. You didn't just pluck a leaf and chew. You prepared. You fasted. You purified yourself. All of this wasn't just for show, it was survival strategy, an attempt to reduce the risk by creating order around the chaos. But no matter how careful, some journeys ended in silence. The tribe buried their dead, whispered of spirits that demanded blood, and continued forward, knowing the risks, but unable to let go of the promise of wisdom. Death was the shadow of the vision, always present, always possible. And yet, humans chose to walk that shadowed path, again and again, because the hunger for meaning was stronger than the fear of death. It is sobering, but also strangely beautiful. That willingness to risk everything for a glimpse of the beyond is part of what made us human. It was reckless, yes. It was deadly, yes. But it was also brave. And in the flicker of firelight, with poison coursing through their bodies, our ancestors took leaps that sometimes ended in laughter, sometimes in glowing mammoths, and sometimes in death. That, too, was part of the story. If you've ever had one glass of wine too many and found yourself insisting that the dog understands quantum mechanics, you already know how easy it is to mix up reality when your mind is altered. Now, imagine you're not in a cozy living room with a bottle of Merlot, but out in the open savannah, under stars so bright they look like silver fire. You've just swallowed a handful of mysterious seeds that the shaman promised would open the doors of the spirit world. And your stomach is making noises, like a distant thunderstorm. The fire crackles, shadows stretch long, and suddenly, there it is, the divine. Except, it's just a bush, a perfectly ordinary bush, a scraggly little shrub, clinging to life in the dust. But in your eyes, it glows with majesty, its branches waving like celestial arms. You fall to your knees, overcome, whispering prayers to a plant that, 5 minutes ago, you considered fuel for kindling. This was the reality of early human encounters with hallucinogens. The line between sacred revelation and absurd comedy was razor thin. Shamans might return with powerful messages from ancestors, but sometimes they also returned, insisting that the great God of the universe was actually a tree stump, shaped like a lumpy potato. Imagine the tribe sitting around, listening with wide eyes, trying not to laugh, as the shaman describes how the holy bush told him everyone should stop hunting rabbits, because rabbits are the true rulers of the earth. A pause follows. People glance at each other, and someone mutters, "Well, at least rabbits are easier to worship than lions." Humor must have been a crucial part of these moments. Laughter breaks tension, especially when reality is wobbling. Imagine a group ritual, everyone tense, waiting for visions to descend. Then someone gasps dramatically, pointing at what they swear is a spirit standing right behind the fire. The tribe jumps, hearts racing, only to realize it's just Uncle Caro stumbling back from the bushes after relieving himself. The fear melts into giggles, then into howls of laughter. Even the shaman cracks a smile, because the spirit world may be terrifying, but it's also ridiculous at times. There were surely countless mishaps. Someone mistaking their own reflection in water for a godly face. Someone else spending hours whispering secrets to a rock that was, in all likelihood, deeply unimpressed. A hunter declaring that he had transformed into a bird and attempting to flap his arms until he toppled over. These moments didn't make it into the solemn myths and cave paintings, but they must have happened often. After all, people are people. If we find ourselves laughing at silly things in altered states today, our ancestors certainly did too. And the laughter wasn't meaningless. It had its own function. In a world where danger lurked in every shadow, where death was always close, humor was a way to survive the heaviness. If the shaman spent a night conversing with a bush and returned with leaves in his hair, the absurdity became part of the tribe's collective memory. The story would be retold later, around the fire, not just as a joke, but as a gentle reminder. Even the path to the spirit world has potholes. Sometimes the mistakes even became lessons. Imagine a young tribesman chewing a sacred root, swearing he has been chosen by the gods. He stumbles dramatically toward a tree, bows before it, and insists the tree has promised him immortality. The next day, when he trips over the same tree root and bruises his shin, the tribe laughs and declares that maybe the gods are telling him to watch where he's going. A silly mishap becomes a moral about humility. There's also the possibility that humor itself was seen as divine. Think of how many cultures even today describe trickster gods, coyotes, ravens, foxes, figures who turn mistakes and jokes into wisdom. Perhaps the earliest seeds of this idea sprouted when someone, high on poison, mistook a log for a spirit, and everyone laughed. Maybe the gods were laughing too. Maybe laughter was itself a sacred bridge, a reminder that the spirit world was not all solemnity, but also play. So picture this: a tribe gathered in the night, the stars like diamonds above them, the fire sending shadows dancing, the shaman trembling with visions. He declares that the great ancestor has appeared in the flames. Everyone leans forward, eyes wide, and then a spark pops. A piece of burning wood shoots out, and the shaman yelps, leaping back, clutching his backside where the ember landed. The awe dissolves into laughter, and suddenly the entire tribe is doubled over, tears streaming, even in the midst of sacred rituals, even in the pursuit of divine truth. Humanity could not help but laugh at itself. And maybe that was the real wisdom, that the world is too strange, too unpredictable, and too full of bushes, pretending to be gods, to take entirely seriously. When the visions ended, when the fire burned low, and the shaman's breathing steadied again, the real work began. It wasn't enough to see glowing animals or ancestors whispering secrets. Those experiences had to be transformed into words, into stories that the tribe could remember, repeat, and live by. And this is where the power of storytelling revealed itself. Without it, visions would vanish like smoke at dawn. With it, they became myths that shaped entire cultures. Imagine the morning after a ritual night. The tribe is gathered, weary and hungry, squinting in the sunlight. The shaman sits in the center, hair wild, eyes still heavy with dream. They begin to speak. Their voice is low at first, hesitant, as they describe the shapes that swirled, the ancestors who appeared, the animals that spoke. Slowly, the words gather strength. The story takes form. The listeners lean forward. By the time the shaman finishes, the vision has become more than a personal hallucination. It has become a shared truth. Stories gave the tribe a way to make sense of the chaos. A spiral seen in the sky wasn't just random. It was the path of souls traveling to the afterlife. A glowing mammoth wasn't just a mammoth on fire in someone's imagination. It was a sacred being guiding the hunt. The story transformed fleeting visions into enduring meaning, and because stories could be repeated, they grew. Each retelling added flourishes, details, lessons. The tale of one night's vision became a myth that explained why the tribe migrated in winter, why they hunted certain animals, why they respected certain plants. The visions became cultural glue, binding people together with shared beliefs. Storytelling also allowed visions to outlive the visionary. Long after the shaman, who spoke with ancestors, had turned to dust, their words lingered. Children grew up hearing them. Adults guided decisions by them. Entire generations carried forward the memory of a single hallucinatory night. And with each passing year, the story grew less like a strange trip and more like divine truth. There was practicality in this too. Stories helped organize survival. If a vision revealed that a river spirit was angry, the tribe might avoid drinking from polluted water. If an ancestor warned that hunting in one valley would bring misfortune, perhaps it was because that valley truly was dangerous, full of predators, or prone to floods. Wrapped in myth, practical knowledge survived longer than memory alone. But stories were not just about warnings and rules. They also carried beauty. In the rhythm of a voice, in the sparks of firelight, in the faces of listeners, visions became poetry. Cosmic patterns of spirals and lattices turned into tales of a web that connected all living things. Animal spirits became characters in adventures, teaching lessons through trickery or wisdom. Ancestors became immortal, their words echoing forever in the voices of the living. Humor played its part here. 2. Remember the bush mistaken for a god? That story didn't vanish. It was told again and again, at first as a joke, then as a parable. Maybe it taught humility. Maybe it became a warning not to trust every vision too literally. Either way, the laughter of one night became wisdom for years to come. In this way, storytelling became the real magic. Plants could twist the mind, but words could twist reality itself. Stories turned death into continuity, animals into teachers, and chaos into order. They provided a bridge between the ineffable and the practical, between visions seen by one and truths shared by all. Over time, these myths grew into religions. Entire cosmologies were born from seeds planted in visions. Spirals became symbols of eternity. Animals became totems. Ancestors became gods. All of it rooted in the simple act of one human returning from a vision and saying, "I saw something, and here is what it means." So, as you drift towards sleep, imagine yourself in that circle, listening to the shaman's voice. The firelight flickers, shadows dance, and the story wraps around you like a blanket. You don't question whether it's true. You feel its truth in your bones, in the way it explains the unexplainable. The story will live on, long after the fire dies, long after the shaman's voice fades, carried by memory into tomorrow, into generations, into forever. That is the power of storytelling. It takes a vision born of poison and turns it into culture, myth, and meaning. The thing about human beings is that we're very good at experimenting, sometimes too good. Curiosity drives us forward, makes us lick leaves, chew roots, and wonder what happens if we boil something that already made Uncle Rato collapse in the dirt. But curiosity also has limits. There comes a point when a plant's reputation is so terrifying, so deadly, that even the bravest shaman will shake their head and say, "Nope, not touching that again." And when that happened in prehistory, fear became tradition, and tradition turned into taboo. It's easy to imagine how these plant taboos formed. Picture a small tribe wandering through the forest. Someone finds bright red berries gleaming in the sunday. They look delicious, like little rubies dangling from a stem. Hungry, a child pops one into their mouth before anyone can stop them. At first, nothing happens. The tribe relaxes. But then, the child starts vomiting, eyes rolling back, and within hours, they are gone. The berries become a curse word. They are never touched again. Mothers hiss at their children if they wander near the plant. Hunters spit on the ground when they pass it. Fear becomes baked into daily life, wrapped around the plant like invisible barbed wire. In some cases, the danger was obvious. Certain plants killed quickly and brutally, but others were trickier. They didn't always kill outright. Instead, they twisted the mind, leaving people wandering, muttering, or walking into rivers at night, convinced the water was calling their name. These plants were just as frightening, maybe even more so. Death was tragic, but madness lingered, unsettling the entire group. Imagine your neighbor, who once helped you carry wood, now staring at the sky for days, refusing to eat, whispering nonsense. To the tribe, it meant the spirits had taken him. The plant that caused it became untouchable. Fear, of course, wasn't just about physical danger. It was also spiritual. If a plant could pull someone's mind so far away that they seemed possessed, then the plant itself must have been a vessel of the spirits, dangerous spirits, angry ones. Using it without respect wasn't just foolish, it was blasphemous. So, entire tribes declared the plant off limits. They wouldn't use it in rituals. They wouldn't touch it for medicine. Sometimes they wouldn't even speak its name. And yet, fear has a funny way of coexisting with fascination. Even when a plant was banned, It loomed large in the imagination. People whispered about it at night, telling stories of foolish men who dared to chew its leaves and never returned. The plant became a character in their mythology, a silent trickster waiting in the undergrowth. Children were warned, step near it, and it will whisper your name. Hunters were told, cut it down, and storms will follow. Fear fed the stories, and the stories fed the fear. It's not so different from how we treat certain things today. Think of how we warn each other about mushrooms in the wild. One wrong bite, and you're finished. Or think of how people whisper about cursed places or forbidden foods. Fear and respect keep us alive, but they also make life strangely theatrical. In prehistory, that theatre was performed under open skies, with plants as the central characters. Sometimes, fear created entire rituals of avoidance. If a plant grew near a water source, people might abandon the area altogether, convinced it was cursed. If a taboo plant sprouted near a burial site, it became proof that the dead were restless. Fear shaped the map of human movement, pushing tribes towards certain regions and away from others. A single shrub could determine whether a valley was seen as home or haunted. And yet, as much as fear was practical, it was also protective. By banning plants, tribes saved themselves from endless trial and error deaths. They created rules that acted as survival codes, wrapping danger in superstition so that future generations wouldn't have to relearn lessons through tragedy. You might laugh at the idea of people bowing nervously as they passed a bush, but that nervous bow was probably the reason they lived long enough to laugh at all. So when we think about early humans and their relationship with mind-altering plants, it wasn't all wild experimentation and glowing mammoths. Sometimes it was silence, avoidance, and the sharp memory of loss. Fear and respect went hand in hand. Certain plants were teachers, others were allies, but some were simply forbidden. And in the quiet spaces between laughter and visions, there was a deeper truth. Humans understood that not everything in nature was meant for us. Some things had to be left alone. Some doors, once opened, could never be closed. It's easy to imagine people experimenting with plants just for the thrill of visions, but that would undersell how practical our ancestors were. They didn't have the luxury of tripping for fun. Every day was about survival. The sun rose, and the question was simple. Will we eat today, or will we starve? Will the hunt succeed, or will we return empty-handed? Will water be found before the children collapse from thirst? In such a world, any tool that promised answers, even strange, dreamlike answers, was worth trying. Altered states became more than spiritual experiences. They became strategies for survival. Think of a hunting party preparing for a dangerous chase. The prey is fast, the terrain harsh, and the risks are high. A shaman steps forward, holding a pouch of sacred seeds. He chews them slowly, his eyes fluttering as the bitter taste floods his mouth. The others watch as he slips into a trance, swaying, murmuring. Hours pass. When he finally rises, his voice is firm. The herd will be near the western valley at dawn. The hunters nod, not because they understand how he knows, but because they trust the process. The altered state has become a compass, pointing the way forward. And sometimes, against all odds, the visions lined up with reality. Shamans might have unconsciously read signs: the faint smell of animals on the wind, the subtle tracks in the dirt, and translated those clues into visions. Or maybe it was coincidence. But when a prediction worked, when hunters returned with food because the shaman had guided them correctly, the tribe's faith deepened. The altered state wasn't just entertainment, it was survival. Water, too, was guided by visions. In times of drought, the tribe might gather around while the shaman drank a bitter brew. His body shook, his face gleamed with sweat, and he whispered of rivers running beneath the ground, of springs hidden by stones. Then the tribe would dig, and sometimes, miraculously, water would gush forth. Even if it was pure luck, the association was cemented. The spirits spoke through visions, and those visions kept the tribe alive. Luck was another part of the equation. Hunting is never certain. You can track for days and still miss your shot. But when the shaman blessed the hunters, when he shook rattles, painted faces, or shared a sacred drink, it created confidence. The hunters believed they carried the spirit's favor. That belief made them calmer, more focused, more willing to take risks. Confidence, born of altered states, was as valuable as any spear. And then there were the rituals before the hunt. Fires lit, chants rising, smoke curling into the night. People shared small doses of sacred plants, enough to blur the edges of fear, but not enough to collapse into madness. They danced, laughed, and painted animals on cave walls. In those altered states, they rehearsed the hunt symbolically. They acted it out, calling upon the spirits of the animals to give themselves willingly. And when the real hunt came, the memory of that ritual carried them. They were not just hunters. They were actors in a cosmic play, moving in step with forces greater than themselves. It's tempting to scoff at these practices, to see them as superstition. But think of how modern athletes rely on rituals, how gamblers carry lucky charms, how we whisper to ourselves before an exam. Belief shapes performance. For prehistoric humans, belief enhanced survival, and altered states, plants, smoke, chants, were tools to sharpen that belief into certainty. Of course, it didn't always work. Sometimes the shaman said the herd would be in the west, and the hunters returned empty-handed. Sometimes the spring was dug in vain, and all they found was dry earth. But even then, the altered states had value. They created unity. They gave the tribe a sense of action, of trying everything possible. And in a world where despair could kill as surely as hunger that mattered, picture a night after a failed hunt. The tribe sits, hungry, worried. The shaman chews a root, his voice rising into chants. He declares that tomorrow will bring better fortune, that the spirits have promised a great kill. The children smile again. The hunters grip their spears with renewed determination. The tribe believes. And sometimes that belief is the difference between trying again and giving up. So altered states weren't just about glowing mammoths or ancestors whispering. They were about survival. They helped humans find food and water, gave courage for the hunt, and kept despair at bay. They turned the randomness of nature into stories of meaning. Stories that said, "You are not alone. The spirits walk with you." And in a harsh world, that belief was as nourishing as food itself. Long before anyone strummed a guitar, long before a drum kit rattled the walls of a basement, and long before someone at a party shouted, "Play Free Bird," there were concerts of a very different kind. Picture a night 70,000 years ago. The fire is roaring high, sparks rising into the blackness like tiny stars, and your tribe gathers close. Someone has chewed the sacred seeds, someone else has smoked the bitter leaves, and the shaman is swaying like a tree caught in a storm. Out of this strange and shifting scene comes sound, not accidental, but deliberate, pulsing sound. The first concerts were not performed on stages, but in circles, tight little groups of humans, moving in rhythm, their bodies painted, their voices rising together in chants that were half music, half prayer. There were no instruments yet, not the way we think of them, but a hollow log could be pounded like a drum. A stick could rattle against bone. Stones could click together with sharp beats. The human body itself was the first instrument, hands clapping, feet stomping, voices humming in low tones that vibrated through the chest. Add intoxication, and suddenly, these simple sounds became transcendent. A slow beat, repeated over and over, can already change the way your brain feels. Add smoke in your lungs, or bitter alkaloids, twisting through your bloodstream, and the effect is multiplied. People began to sway together, moving as one body, eyes half closed, voices blending into a single rising wave. For the first time, humans weren't just individuals experiencing altered states. They were a group, united in sound, riding the same wave of rhythm into a shared vision. Imagine sitting there, stomach buzzing with strange energy, your heart pounding with the beat of the drumstick on wood. The chanting begins low, murmurs that make the air tremble. Slowly it builds, louder, faster, until you feel as though the entire world is vibrating. The stars above seem to pulse in time with the rhythm. The fire cracks with perfect timing, like it knows the chorus. Your vision begins to blur, and suddenly, you are not just sitting in a circle. You are flying, soaring above, looking down at your tribe, as though you are both there and not there. That was the power of the first concerts. They weren't entertainment, they were transformation. Sound, rhythm, and intoxication became tools that opened the doors of perception wider than ever. A plant alone might make you see patterns, but chanting turned those patterns into journeys. A drumbeat alone might quicken your pulse, but combined with intoxication, it became a heartbeat of the universe. And, of course, it wasn't all solemn awe. Humor always slipped through. Maybe the chant was meant to be serious, but someone came in on the wrong note and kept singing off-key until the whole group dissolved into laughter. Maybe the drummer missed the beat and hit himself in the knee. Maybe a dancer spun too wildly, tripped, and landed face first in the dirt. Even in moments of cosmic connection, humans remained wonderfully human, clumsy and joyful in equal measure. Still, the collective effect was undeniable. These nights of sound and vision cemented the bond of the tribe. They weren't just random fun, they were rehearsals for survival. Moving together, breathing together, trusting the rhythm together, all of it strengthened the invisible threads that held the group intact. A tribe that could chant and dance as one was a tribe that could also hunt as one, defend as one, and endure hunger as one. Music wasn't decoration, it was glue. Even today, echoes of those first concerts linger. When people go to music festivals, they dance in unison, swaying to beats, lights flashing like fire sparks in the night. Some take substances to enhance the experience, and suddenly, the music feels like more than sound. It feels like a language older than words. In a way, they are returning to the savannah, to the fire, to the first circle of humans who discovered that rhythm and intoxication could make the world bigger than itself. So as you drift off, imagine that night, long ago, the beat of wood on log, the rattling of stones, the rise and fall of voices in the dark. You are no longer separate. You are part of a chorus that includes your ancestors, your neighbors, even the animals painted on cave walls. The concert is not a show, it is survival. It is communion. It is the first great orchestra of humanity. For most of us, dreams are strange little plays that run while we sleep. We wake shake our heads, and laugh about how we spent the night being chased by a giant pancake or arguing with a teacher who also happened to be a wolf. Dreams are dreams. Reality is reality, and the border between them is usually clear. But for early humans, especially those who experimented with mind-altering plants, the line between dream and vision was far less solid. Sometimes it vanished entirely. Consider what it must have been like. You go to sleep after a long day, and in your dreams you see your ancestors. They speak to you, warning you to avoid a certain valley or promising success in tomorrow's hunt. You wake, heart pounding, unsure if it was just a dream or an actual visit from the spirit world. Now imagine you chew the sacred root the next night, and while awake, you see the exact same ancestors, speaking the same words. Was the dream a vision? Was the vision a dream? For many, the categories blurred together, blending into one continuous fabric of experience. This blurring had enormous consequences. If dreams and visions both carried truth, then sleep itself was sacred. Night was no longer just rest, it was travel. The bed of leaves beneath you was a launchpad to the world of spirits. Shamans learned to interpret dreams with the same seriousness as visions. They saw them as messages, woven from the same cloth as the patterns glimpsed under intoxication. Imagine a tribe debating a journey. One hunter insists that in his dream, the spirits said to follow the river. The shaman agrees, because the night before, he saw the same river glowing in a vision after chewing bitter leaves. Together, dream and vision confirm the path. The decision is made. The tribe follows, and when they find food, the power of dreams is sealed as truth. But not all dreams were welcome. Nightmares blurred with bad trips. A man might wake screaming, convinced a shadow followed him from the spirit world into waking life. A woman might see her dead child in both sleep and vision, unsure whether it was grief or a true haunting. Fear and comfort mingled. Sometimes dreams gave hope. Sometimes they felt like traps. And of course, there were the absurd ones. Just as today we might dream about showing up to work without pants, early humans must have had their share of nonsense. Perhaps someone dreamed of a rabbit lecturing them about proper spear technique, only to wake laughing. But here's the thing, even absurd dreams could be reinterpreted as meaningful. The rabbit might become a trickster spirit. The nonsense became myth. And when visions echoed those same images, when someone high on seeds also swore a rabbit taught them hunting skills, the absurd solidified into belief. It is fascinating to think how much culture grew out of this blurred line. Religious ideas, myths of journeys to other realms, all of them were nourished by the mingling of sleep and intoxication. Both states bent the mind in similar ways. Both created vivid images, strange voices, patterns of meaning, and both left humans waking with the sense that the world was larger than it seemed. Modern science explains dreams as the brain's way of processing memory and visions as chemical shifts in perception. But imagine living without that framework. All you had was experience, and the experiences were uncanny. You lay down, slept, and traveled. You chewed a root, stayed awake, and traveled again. To you, there was no difference. Both were true. Both were doors into the unknown. The blending of dreams and visions also gave humanity its first philosophers. People sat by the fire, debating whether life itself was a dream. If the ancestors could speak in both sleep and intoxication, maybe the waking world was just another kind of vision. These musings found their way into mythologies, where gods created the world through dreams, or humans lived inside a dream, spun by cosmic beings. And in the midst of all this, humor again softened the edges. Someone woke, insisting they dreamed that the entire tribe should hop on one leg all day. People laughed, but some probably hopped anyway, just in case. When visions and dreams both had the potential to be divine, no one wanted to risk ignoring the wrong message. Better to laugh and try than to dismiss and anger the spirits. So as you drift toward your own dreams tonight, consider that you are stepping into the same blurred territory your ancestors knew. Whether asleep or intoxicated, they entered the world of symbols, voices, and glowing animals, never quite sure where reality ended and the spirit world began. And maybe, in that uncertainty, they found their greatest wisdom, that the world is stranger than it appears. And sometimes, the difference between a dream and a vision is nothing more than the time of day. Politics did not begin with kings, queens, and long speeches about taxes. It began with firelight, with whispers, and with one person claiming they had heard something nobody else could. In the small world of early tribes, the shaman was not just a healer or a dream interpreter. They were a politician, whether they knew it or not. Their currency was vision. Their power was access. And their authority flowed not from weapons or wealth, but from the invisible. Picture a tribe gathered after a long day. Everyone is tired. Bellies are half empty. The fire crackles. The hunters talk quietly about tomorrow. The children doze. And then the shaman rises. Their eyes are distant, their voice strange, and they say, "The ancestors spoke to me last night. They told me the herd will move east." The hunters glance at each other. East? None of them saw tracks that way. But who can argue with ancestors? No one wants to risk insulting the dead. So they nod, and the shaman has just directed the tribe's next move. That is politics in its earliest form, guiding collective action, not through brute force, but through invisible authority. This authority was delicate, but powerful. If the prediction turned out right, if the hunters found food, the shaman's status grew. Success meant validation. They weren't just eccentric, they were chosen. And with each success, the tribe trusted more. With more trust came more influence. Suddenly, the shaman wasn't just consulted about hunts, but also disputes, marriages, migrations. Their visions became laws. Their dreams became boundaries for what was acceptable. Of course, not everyone believed without question. Skeptics must have existed even then. Perhaps one grumpy hunter muttered under his breath, "Ancestors always seem to agree with the shaman's personal opinion." Perhaps another whispered, "Funny how the spirits never complain about the shaman eating the last honeycomb." Yet skepticism was dangerous. Mock the shaman too loudly, and you weren't just insulting a person, you were insulting the spirits themselves. You risked angering forces that everyone feared. So, politics was enforced not by armies, but by awe. There were, no doubt, moments of comedy. Imagine the shaman stumbling out of a trance, solemnly declaring that the gods had told him everyone must stop bathing in the river for 3 moons. The tribe groans, already imagining the smell, but who wants to argue with gods? Or perhaps the shaman insists that only they may eat a certain sacred mushroom, because otherwise the spirits will be displeased. A clever move. Exclusive access, not only to visions, but to snacks. The tribe shrugs and accepts it, because fear of the unseen is stronger than hunger for fungus. This monopoly on the invisible was the foundation of tribal politics. The shaman claimed, and often believed, that only through them could the tribe hear the voices of ancestors and gods. If you wanted answers, You had to go through them. In that sense, they were the first gatekeepers, the earliest bureaucrats of the spirit world. Imagine trying to argue your case directly with the divine, only for the shaman to step in and say, "I'll handle this conversation. Thank you very much." Spirits don't appreciate interruptions. But power always carries risk. A shaman who failed too often, who predicted hunts that collapsed or claimed visions that led to disaster, could lose authority quickly. The tribe might begin to whisper that the spirits had abandoned them. In some cases, the solution was exile or worse. Politics was brutal in its simplicity. Your authority lasted only as long as your visions worked often enough to maintain belief. Yet overall, the system endured. Shamans were not simply power-hungry individuals. Many likely believed fully in their role. They weren't con men. They were participants in the collective dream of their tribe. They sacrificed health by consuming dangerous plants, endured terrifying visions, and lived with the burden of interpreting mysteries. Their exclusivity was both privilege and punishment. Imagine being the one everyone turned to for answers. When storms destroyed shelters or disease swept the camp. It wasn't always a comfortable job. Still, exclusivity shaped early societies. The shaman became the tribe's historian, judge, priest, and sometimes even strategist. Through their visions, they consolidated influence. Through influence, they guided survival. And through survival, they cemented the first forms of politics. So when you picture those early tribes, don't just see hunters with spears or mothers with children. See the shaman sitting by the fire, a flicker of smoke curling around their face, speaking words that bound the tribe together. Politics did not begin in marble halls. It began in whispers about glowing mammoths and ancestors nodding from beyond the grave. Human beings are creative by nature. We paint, sing, carve, write, and tell stories about glowing animals, even when no one asks. But where did this restless imagination come from? Some scientists, and many storytellers, have wondered whether altered states, the visions, the patterns, the strange voices that emerged from chewing roots and sipping brews, played a role in shaping not only our culture, but our very evolution. Imagine a small group of humans around a fire. The shaman has just finished a ritual, their voice trembling, as they describe a vision of spirals wrapping around the sky. The listeners are entranced. Someone picks up a piece of charcoal and scratches a spiral onto a rock. Another hums softly, mimicking the rhythm of the shaman's chant. Without realizing it, they are creating art, music, and perhaps even language, all sparked by the strange experience of seeing something unreal, yet unforgettable. Altered states flood the mind with associations. You see a spiral, but it connects to the stars, which connect to animals, which connect to ancestors. Suddenly, your brain is weaving metaphors, telling stories, making links that ordinary perception might never suggest. Creativity thrives in those leaps. What begins as confusion becomes inspiration. And inspiration, once shared, becomes culture. Think about language itself. Words are symbols, strange sounds agreed upon, to stand in for things. To invent language requires a leap of imagination. This sound equals that meaning. Could altered states have encouraged such leaps? A person hears a voice during a vision. They return, repeating the sound. Others imitate it. The sound becomes attached to the idea of a spirit, or an animal, or a place. Slowly, words accumulate, born from echoes of visions. It is speculative, of course, but there's a reason cave walls are covered in patterns, spirals, zigzags, dots that mirror the entoptic imagery of hallucinations. Those images were not random graffiti. They were attempts to capture visions. The first galleries were caves, the first canvases stone, the first critics, probably fellow tribe members, squinting at the wall and saying, "I guess it looks like a bison if you tilt your head." Yet, those drawings survived tens of thousands of years. They became part of humanity's memory, proof that altered states spilled into creativity. Humor plays its part, too. Imagine someone stumbling out of a trance, insisting the spirits sang a new sound. They hum it loudly, and the tribe laughs at how silly it island. But later, the sound catches on. It becomes part of chants, then part of stories. The silly hum transforms into tradition. Accident becomes culture. In this way, even mistakes contributed to evolution. Modern science suggests altered states stimulate the brain's default mode network, loosening associations and encouraging novel connections. To our ancestors, this meant visions of cosmic webs, talking animals, and ancestors singing songs. To us, it might mean sudden insights or wild creativity. Either way, the pattern is the same. Unusual mental states spark invention. And over thousands of years, that invention shaped the trajectory of humanity. Language, music, art, perhaps all of them, received a push from the nights when people chewed bitter leaves and saw the universe ripple. They returned to camp and could not help but share what they saw, using gestures, drawings, sounds. The need to communicate visions may have accelerated the evolution of communication itself. You can't describe a glowing mammoth without at least trying to invent words for glow and mammoth. So when we ask whether these strange experiments helped spark creativity and language, the answer might be yes, not as deliberate invention, but as accidental evolution. Plants bent minds, minds made art, art demanded words, and words built worlds. Humanity stumbled into genius, one hallucination at a time. It is strangely comforting, isn't it? To think that your ability to speak, to imagine, to dream in color and metaphor may be partly thanks to ancestors who dared to nibble poison and return with stories. Our creativity, our language, our art, it might all be the echo of visions long past. And as you drift into sleep, perhaps you too will glimpse the spirals, the patterns, the voices that once turned confusion into creation. There is something fascinating about human beings. We are endlessly drawn to things that both terrify us and keep us alive. Fire is a perfect example. It can cook our food, light our nights, and warm our shelters, but leave it unchecked, and it will devour everything we love. Water, too. It quenches thirst and sustains life, but floods and storms can sweep whole families away. In the prehistoric world, plants occupied that same dual space. They were medicine and poison, doorway and death sentence, revered tool and lurking threat. The rituals built around them were steeped in awe, because everyone knew the risk was not imaginary. One wrong dose, one careless moment, and what was meant to be a journey into wisdom became a walk into the grave. That was the paradox early tribes lived with. They needed these rituals. They gave meaning, healing, and sometimes even practical direction for survival. But they also frightened everyone. The shaman trembling by the fire, eyes rolled back, sweat streaming, muttering in voices not their own. This wasn't just spiritual theater. It was dangerous business. Everyone present knew there was a chance the shaman wouldn't come back. And even if they did, sometimes they returned broken, minds frayed like old rope, never quite the same again. That tension, the need, and the fear gave the rituals their power. Fear was part of the preparation. The whole tribe might fast before a ceremony, washing themselves, painting their faces, chanting into the night. All of it created the sense that what they were about to do was not casual. It wasn't like eating berries or roasting meat. It was stepping onto sacred, perilous ground. Fear kept them careful. Fear made sure only the right people touched the right plants in the right ways. It was, in its own way, a survival strategy, but reliance was just as real. For all the risks, people kept returning to these practices. Why? Because they worked, at least in ways that mattered to the tribe. They healed wounds, soothed pain, eased grief, and sometimes even inspired decisions that led to food, safety, and survival. If the risk was death, the reward was life. For a family watching a sick child grow weaker by the day, the danger of a plant ritual didn't seem so bad compared to the danger of doing nothing. For hunters staring at an empty horizon, listening to a shaman describe where the herd would be tomorrow was better than aimless wandering. Even if the spirits didn't always deliver, the possibility of guidance was too precious to abandon. Think of the shaman as both gambler and guide. Every time they prepared a ritual, they were rolling dice with the unknown. Sometimes the spirits came gently, bringing visions of ancestors and cosmic patterns. Other times, they came like a storm, filling the shaman with terror, leaving them shivering in the dirt. And occasionally, the spirits didn't come at all, and all anyone got was nausea and a very long night. Yet the tribe still relied on those rolls of the dice, because even a small chance at wisdom or healing was worth the cost. There must have been debates about it, just as there are debates today about risky practices. Some argued that the dangers were too high. Others insisted the rituals were the only way to keep the tribe in harmony with the spirits. Around the fire, people whispered about the last ceremony, where a young apprentice never woke up. And yet, the next season, they prepared the plants again. Fear and reliance were woven together. The risk was acknowledged, but the reward was pursued. It wasn't only about belief either. On a deeper level, the rituals themselves changed people. Even when the visions were chaotic or frightening, they bound the tribe together. Watching the shaman convulse, hearing their words, sharing in their fear and awe, these were collective experiences. They gave everyone a sense of unity, a feeling that they were part of something larger. And when food was scarce and predators were many, that feeling could be as important as any spear. So the risk factor was never hidden. It was part of the package. Tribes feared the plants, feared the spirits they summoned, feared the possibility of death. But they also relied on them, trusted them, and carried them forward through generations. The risk wasn't a flaw in the system. It was the very thing that made the system sacred. And maybe that's the most human thing of all, that we lean into danger not because we are reckless, but because we sense that sometimes the most frightening paths are the ones that keep us alive. Fast forward from the firelight of prehistory to the neon glow of the 21st century, and you'll notice something curious. People haven't changed all that much. Sure, we have smartphones, airplanes, and espresso machines that can hiss like angry cats. But the same impulses that drove our ancestors to chew bitter roots still pulse in us. We still seek altered states, not only to escape reality, but to feel connected to each other, to the universe, to something beyond the limits of ordinary life. Look around, and you'll see it everywhere. At music festivals, People sway in massive crowds, lights flashing, bass thundering in their chests. Some use substances, others don't, but the effect is the same, a collective shift in perception. Strangers dance together, laugh together, weep together, their sense of self dissolving into something bigger. That's not so different from the first concerts by firelight, when tribes chanted into the night and felt the spirits moving through them. The technology has changed. The log drum has become a speaker stack, but the yearning is identical. Meditation and yoga studios hum with another version of this. People close their eyes, breathe deeply, and slip into states of calm, where the chatter of daily life fades. They call it mindfulness, but to an ancestor watching from the past, it would look like another ritual of altered awareness, another way of stepping outside ordinary thought. Even sports fans chasing the high of victory, gamblers chasing the rush of risk, or climbers dangling off cliffs for the thrill, all of these are echoes of the same desire to break the boundaries of the ordinary. Of course, substances remain part of the picture. Humans experiment with everything from caffeine to psychedelics, from alcohol to plant medicines, revived from ancient traditions. Coffee jolts the brain into clarity, alcohol blurs edges and loosens tongues, and psychedelics open the same strange doors our ancestors once stumbled through. In every case, the appeal is connection. People drink together to bond, take part in ceremonies to feel united, sip coffee together to spark conversation. Even our legal, everyday substances are tools for shaping consciousness and weaving bonds. What's striking is how universal it remains. Whether in tribal villages or skyscraper cities, humans crave that step into the extraordinary. We crave the laughter, the visions, the sense that life is more than bills and breakfast. Some find it in church pews, others in nightclubs, others in quiet solitude, staring at the stars. But the root impulse is the same one that sent a shaman trembling into visions long ago: the need to feel less alone, to believe that the world is deeper and more connected than it appears. There's humor in the continuity, too. Just as a prehistoric hunter might have mistaken a bush for a god, someone today might stare at a glow stick at 3 a.m. and swear it contains the secrets of the universe. Just as a shaman once warned the tribe not to eat certain berries, modern doctors warn us about mixing certain cocktails. The settings change, the costumes change, but the dance is old. And perhaps that is the most comforting truth. We are not as modern as we think. Beneath our suits and smartphones, we are still people gathered around a fire, hungry for meaning, willing to risk discomfort, to touch something beyond ourselves. The echoes of plant-based rituals live on in our festivals, our faiths, our art, even our jokes. They remind us that we are part of a very long story, a story of humans chasing connection through laughter, danger, vision, and rhythm. So as you drift into sleep, remember this: the desire you feel to connect, to belong, to reach for something bigger, is ancient. It carried your ancestors through poison and prayer, through song and story, through firelight and fear, and it still carries you today. The echoes have not faded. They are alive in your heartbeat, in your laughter, and in the dreams you are about to enter. History is full of small decisions that turned out to be enormous. One hunter choosing to follow a track instead of ignoring it. One family wandering into a new valley instead of staying put. One curious soul picking up a root, sniffing it, and saying, "Well, why not?" and chewing it, despite the bitter taste. When we look back, it can feel inevitable, as though humans were always destined to become the species that painted caves, built cities, and argued about whether pineapple belongs on pizza. But inevitability is a trick our minds play. In truth, nothing was guaranteed. Every step forward carried a chance of slipping backward, and nowhere was this more true than with the dangerous experiments that involved plants, poisons, and visions. Which brings us to the great what if. What if our species had not taken that risk? It's a strange thought. Imagine if, tens of thousands of years ago, one tribe had seen what happened when someone chewed the wrong leaf, convulsed on the ground, and died, and declared, "That's it. No more. We are done with strange plants forever." They build a rule, a taboo. Eat only what fills the belly, nothing more. No experiments, no visions, no chance that bend reality. That tribe would probably have survived in the short term. Fewer people dying of accidental overdoses. Fewer nights of chaos around the fire. They would have played it safe. And safety might have carried them for a while. But think of what would have been lost. No visions of glowing mammoths to inspire cave art. No ancestor voices to push people toward ritual storytelling. No rhythmic chants merging with intoxication to form the first concerts. Without the altered states, maybe creativity itself would have bloomed more slowly. Maybe language would have stumbled along in a plainer form, focused only on grunts for food and danger, never branching into metaphors of spirit animals and cosmic spirals. Without those risks, perhaps we'd still be clever apes, roaming grasslands, surviving, yes, but never quite imagining. Humans without imagination are hard to picture. What would our species be like if we had only stuck to the visible, the measurable, the safe? Maybe we'd be more cautious, more practical. Maybe our shelters would be stronger, because no one wasted time painting spirals on cave walls. But would we still sit at night, staring at fire, telling stories that make children dream? Or would we be silent, efficient, and boring? You can almost see it. Tribes eating their meals in silence, everyone staring at their hands. No laughter, no myths, just survival. Perhaps such people would live longer, but would they live in any way we'd recognize as human? There's another possibility. If our ancestors had refused the risks, maybe we wouldn't even be here at all. The plants weren't just about visions. They were medicine. Pain eased, infections soothed, hunger curbed, all by the careful use of dangerous plants. Without them, entire families might have been lost to illness. Tribes might have collapsed. The species might have stumbled and dwindled, wiped out by a lack of the very knowledge that came from daring to chew, boil, and experiment. Safety isn't always safe when it means rejecting discovery. It's humbling to think how much of what we call civilization might trace back to those risky nights by the fire. Agriculture, art, religion, even science, all of them require imagination. The leap from what is to what might be. And imagination thrives when boundaries blur, when dreams and visions pour into waking life. If no one had ever dared to risk poison for a glimpse of the beyond, perhaps the leap never would have come. We might be clever toolmakers, yes, but not storytellers, not dreamers, not builders of cities, just another species surviving until the world moved on without us. Of course, it's possible another path might have emerged. Maybe imagination doesn't need altered states. Maybe we'd have invented myth and art through dreams alone, or through sheer curiosity about the stars overhead. Maybe the plants only accelerated what would have happened anyway. But still, there's something unique about risk. Risk is the spark that sets new paths alight. Without it, we tend to stay where we are. And staying where we are, in a dangerous and unpredictable world, is often a slow road to extinction. So the big what if leads to gratitude. We are here not because our ancestors avoided danger, but because they leaned into it. They looked at bitter leaves and glowing mushrooms and thought, well, maybe. They rolled the dice again and again, and sometimes paid the price. But enough of them survived to pass on the visions, the songs, the laughter, and the wisdom. Enough of them chose risk over silence. As you drift towards sleep, consider this. Every word you know, every story you've ever heard, every song that has ever moved you, may be an echo of those risks. If our ancestors had chosen safety, those things might not exist. You might not exist. Humanity, as we know it, might never have bloomed. Risk carried us here, carried us through. The plants were dangerous, yes, but without them, maybe the stars would still be just lights in the sky, not symbols of something greater. The what if reminds us. The line between extinction and imagination was thinner than we like to admit, and we only crossed it because someone, long ago, was willing to chew the unknown. The night is quiet now. The fire has burned low, embers glowing faintly, their light rising and falling like the last breaths of a long day. Imagine yourself there, tens of thousands of years ago, sitting shoulder to shoulder with your tribe. The world is vast and dangerous, but above you the stars are endless, glittering like jewels scattered across black velvet, and in your body the plants are humming. Your thoughts are bending and curling, your senses opening wide. You are dizzy, trembling, but also strangely calm. For the first time, you feel certain that the darkness around you is not empty. Your ancestors lived these moments. They chewed bitter roots, smoked strange leaves, swallowed brews that tasted like dirt and thunder, and they let the world blur. In that blurring, they found connection. They saw ancestors in the flames, animals glowing in the distance, cosmic webs binding everything together. They laughed at bushes mistaken for gods, wept at visions of lost children, and whispered prayers to the patterns in the sky. And through it all, one conviction grew. They were not alone. It's easy to forget that feeling in the modern world, surrounded by buildings and buzzing lights. But the truth remains the same. The same stars shine above you. The same body carries echoes of ancient risks. The same imagination that once turned poison into prayer now turns stories into meaning. When your ancestors stared upward, trembling with visions, they weren't just surviving another night. They were weaving the first threads of culture, of belonging, of humanity itself. So, as you settle deeper into your bed, imagine that lineage flowing into you. You are the child of dreamers, of risk-takers, of people who dared to believe the world was more than rocks and hunger. They found meaning in danger, hope in visions, laughter in absurdity, and strength in connection. You carry all of that in your bones, in your breath, in the quiet beating of your heart. Feel the softness around you now, the safety they could only imagine. Listen to the silence of your room, broken only by your breath. Somewhere, in that silence, the voices of your ancestors linger, not in words, but in the comfort of continuity. They too once looked at the night sky, convinced that beyond the fear and the dark, there was company, spirits, animals, ancestors. It didn't matter. What mattered was the certainty that life was not a lonely accident. And perhaps they were right. Perhaps connection is the truest vision of all. Let that thought cradle you. You are not alone. You never were. From the first human who trembled beside a fire to you, lying here now, drifting into dreams. The thread is unbroken. The same stars shine, the same need for meaning hums, the same hope that tomorrow will bring light and food and laughter. You are part of that endless chain, carried forward by courage and risk and imagination. Close your eyes. Breathe slowly. Let the warmth of your blanket be the fire. Let the quiet of your room be the night. And let the thought of your ancestors buzzing on poison, laughing at the absurd, staring at the stars be the lullaby that carries you into sleep. They found comfort in the idea that they were never truly alone, and neither are you. As you drift off tonight, let the echoes of your ancestors keep you warm and remind you that you're part of a story stretching back through the ages. Sleep well, rest deeply, and let tomorrow find you refreshed. And if you're somehow still awake, you can keep the journey going by clicking on one of the 2 videos now on your screen, each one waiting to carry you further into the mysteries of our past. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next story. Sweet dreams, traveler, and good night.